Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 740B, and today's date is August 12th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Might Send Troops to Iraq While the No-Fly Zone is Implemented in Syria. Let's get right into the economic collapse geopolitical news. Now, Congress, as we know, is really not working for the people at this point in time. They're working for corporations, bankers, other foreign entities. And you can see everything that they're doing is not for the people. And the people are starting to wake up and realize this. Because Gallup has just done a poll, and they're saying that there's only 14% of the American population that is actually happy with what Congress is doing today. And actually, it's gone down from 17%. So it was at 17% in July, and in August right now, when they redid the survey, it has dropped to 14%. So the American people are realizing that Congress is really not working for them. They're not working in their best interests. They're working in their own interests. They're working for bankers, corporations, foreign entities. And we can see at this point in time, as time goes on, Congress eventually will have to be removed. Because if they're not working for the people, we don't need them in there. I mean, the way I see it, things need to change. There needs to be certain laws, rules, whatever we want to do, but when you're in government, you cannot accept any type of campaign donation from any corporate entity, from any foreign government entity, from lobbyist groups. This should be not allowed whatsoever. And while you're in Congress, you're not allowed to basically work with any of these groups either, because it seems like all of these groups corrupt our leaders, and the leaders take the money, and eventually what happens is they do things in their best interest and not for the people. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand the situation is definitely getting worse. Ukraine right now is upping the ante. They're going to place more sanctions on Russia, and this is coming from Yatsenyuk. So they're having a second wave of sanctions placed on Russia, because what they're doing at this point is they're trying to push the offensive in Ukraine. They cut off the gas supplies from Russia. They're trying to get gas from other areas. They're filling up their underground tanks because they know eventually when they come into winter and this war continues on, they don't want to rely on Russia for anything. And also they're placing sanctions on Russia to separate themselves and to try to hurt Russia at this point. We see that the provocations in the southeastern area on the OSCE was aimed at removing the OSCE from this area and maybe bringing in peacekeepers, because we have to remember Poroshenko, for the longest time and continually going on with it, he wants peacekeepers in this region. This way, he can declare martial law and take control of the entire area. Now, we see that Kiev now admits it, yes, we are moving heavy weapons back to the contact line. And they're trying to convince everyone that this is not going to violate the Minsk deal whatsoever. So they're not abiding by the Minsk agreement. It seems like the Minsk agreement is pretty much done at this point in time. So we have the Minsk 1 and the Minsk 2, and Kiev decided that we don't want a peaceful ceasefire at this time. We want war. And you have to remember the central bankers did not get what they paid for. They want the entire country. They want the port. They want the southeast and the manufacturing area. And they will not stop until they get this. Basically, what Ukraine is saying is we are developing an active defense in the east, strengthening our armed forces with new weapons and hardware. Active defense basically is in reaction to the provocations from the southeastern people. Well, let's see, Kiev is continually firing upon the southeastern people, hoping that they would fire back. And when they do, they just point to them and say, look, see what they did? So we're seeing about 100 Ukrainian armed vehicles are now on the contact line. There are 90 tanks, artillery, armored vehicles, all there right now, getting ready for this major offensive. Now, Donetsk is looking at the situation and saying, it looks like we're heading back to a full-scale military actions. They have been counting the amount of shelling that has been coming across from the Kiev forces. And they write down and they record all the ceasefire violations. Right now, they're saying they're getting hit about 60 to 80 times per day. They're saying during the full-scale military action, it was between 150 and 180. And they're saying they're getting very close to the same thing. So basically, we're almost at a full-scale military action right now. And we understand that this is being really pushed hard because I'm seeing the propaganda all over the place in the corporate media and everywhere else. We see that there's a think tank, a European defense think tank report that came out, and they revealed that that NATO and Russia are now bracing for a possible military confrontation. Really? Well, we kind of knew this all along. I mean, think about this. And we've been talking about this for a long time. The United States and NATO have been building military assets up all across Eastern Europe, putting tanks and vehicles in caves, bringing in more troops, making a rapid reaction team to counter Russia, continuing the provoking of Russia, continuing the provoking of China in the Pacific, because we all know what this is all about. This is about starting World War III. And everything is being prepped and ready to go. This is what we're seeing right now. And it's not all of a sudden as a surprise to everyone, because we have been following this all along. We've been following the buildup. We've been following the military assets that have been placed all around the world. And we've been following up and we've been seeing the provocations. So we know exactly what is going on. Now out in the Middle East, we see supposedly, allegedly, the Prime Minister, which is the puppet government, Abdullah al-Tahini, he has resigned. Now some people are saying no, he has not resigned. Other people are saying yes, he has resigned. Now he announced this on a live talk show saying yes, he is done. And of course, they're still trying to put together this peace talk, but again, the government in Tripoli, the people's government that was placed in there, not the puppet government, the people's government, they basically backed out of the peace talks because part of the peace talks was to give up all their power and return the puppet government back into power. And they basically didn't want to do this whatsoever. And we see the situation in Libya is definitely ramping up right now. Eventually, the United States will have no choice whatsoever but to go back into each one of these countries. And this is why they're going to have to do something with this authorization for war. Basically, Congress is just sitting on it. There's no traction for it. The people do not want war. They all know this. The polls show no war, no troops, nothing. But that won't stop them. We know this. Because basically what they do is they use false flag events to make people do things they normally wouldn't do. Like go to war. Like put boots on the ground. And eventually, they will turn to this to get something going here. Now, there's a U.S. Army head who is out there saying U.S. military may consider embedding soldiers with the Iraqi security forces if there's no progress made in Iraq. Because what we're seeing is the people are rising up in Iraq. The Iraqi forces that were trained via the puppet government, it's not working out. Most of them are defecting over to the people. This is why we see them dropping the weapons and running off and saying, you know something? I'm going to join these people and take back the country. And now the U.S. government is prepping everyone to say, listen, we might have to put boots on the ground that will actually fight in Iraq. Because we know all this is coming. And it's going to come very soon. Now, out in Syria, we are seeing there's going to be some type of 48 ceasefire. And it's agreed between the army, the Syrian insurgents, the Lebanese Hezbollah groups in 3 towns. And it was supposed to start at 6 local time today. The ceasefire will apply in the rebel-held town of Zabadini, as well as the Shiite towns in Idlib. So we're going to have to see how that works out. But every time we see this ceasefire, basically it doesn't work out, and something happens and they're fighting once again. Now we understand that Turkey, with the U.S. government, they are creating a buffer zone, a no-fly zone. Now we know the Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government, Israel, and the coalition forces, they do not have an air force, so there's no reason for this. And this is why they're trying to lean towards a buffer zone. They don't want to call it a no-fly zone. And we're starting to see that Al-Qaeda, which is also run by the CIA, pulled back from these certain areas to set up this buffer zone. And we're seeing something very interesting. Instead of using the trained Syrian rebels, which is not working out whatsoever, because they released their first batch and it was a complete disaster, they are now bringing in Turkmen, ethnic Turkmen fighters that have arrived in Syria. The soldiers were trained in Turkey and are in one of the biggest moderate opposition rebel coalitions in the country. And they're going to be used to clear the way for this entire safe zone, and they're going to be used to control it. This way will make it easier for the Islamic State to move in and out. It will make it easier for Turkey to bring in ground troops, for the U.S. to bring in ground troops, because, again, this safe zone, this buffer zone, is not part of Syria. So Turkmen, they're entering Syria, and it shows the U.S. and Turkey are going to rely on them instead of the Syrian rebels, because that was a complete disaster. Now, Saudi Arabia, they are still out there, and the foreign minister is saying, listen, I just want to make this clear to everyone. Our position on Syria, Assad must go. We believe the question of Bashar al-Assad has been solved. There is no place in Syria for him. Well, we all knew this. The U.S. is continually saying this. We see Saudi Arabia is continually saying this. Turkey is continually saying this. UK is continually saying this. And they're doing whatever they possibly can to get him out of power. And they're just throwing propaganda after propaganda to convince you that he's doing things to hurt his own people. Of course, they started out with the sarin gas, didn't work out. They were using chlorine gas. We find out that it was the Islamic State that had chlorine gas, not Assad. So Russia stepped in and said, listen, let's put together some type of investigation with the UN to find out with evidence who was responsible for this. Because, of course, with the United States, they just turn right to Assad. So now I see out of the UK more propaganda. Assad is now using napalm on his own people. They're seeing buildings on flames, and there seems to be a liquid gel on the buildings. So it has to be Assad, because it makes sense. He wants people to fight for him. He's giving them amnesty, and then he's going to kill his own people. You know, the same people that voted him into office. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's almost like George Washington going out and destroying villages of the people who are supporting him. Why would they do this? No, we know what this is. This is propaganda to make everyone think that Assad is responsible for all of this. But again, they have no proof. They see buildings on fire, they make up a story, but guess what? They have no evidence. Their evidence is the effects afterwards. There's nothing linking him to this. Just like with the sarin gas, just like with the chlorine gas. And I use this example over and over. It's like having a dead body, and you're in a courtroom and you point to a person saying, here's the dead body, this person did it. Well, what about everything in between? How did they do it? What did they do? What did they use? How are you linking this person to this dead body? They have nothing. They're just showing the aftermath, and this is what we're seeing right now. Now, the Islamic State came out and they said they have hacked into the U.S. military personnel files, and they have retrieved government information, personal data. And we know this is all surface information. Most likely they didn't hack into anything. This is a propaganda stunt like they normally do. And this is to convince us that the Islamic State is basically coming here to the United States. Because we have to remember how this whole thing is going to play out. And they've been warning us and telling us about this for a very long time. And we see with the Islamic State, with this message coming out, that they'll be part of some type of cyber attack. They're trying to convince everyone they have the capability to do this. But we know all of this is going to be an inside job. We know operatives are already in position. They're just waiting for the thumbs up, the green light to go ahead and do this. And at this point in time, as the economy continually falls apart, and we know it's falling apart because basically John Kerry kind of messed up when he said that Iran, if this deal doesn't go through, the US dollar will collapse. And basically he's told us already that this system is just held together with tape, glue, and spit. And if this doesn't work, if they cannot prop up the system, the whole thing falls apart. And if the whole thing falls apart, guess what? We're going to have to go to plan B, which we are ready and prepared for, and that is to create some type of false flag event to convince you that the Islamic State, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Syria, you name it, they are responsible for the economic collapse here in the United States. And I think at this point in time, as we watch this whole thing unfold, we realize that it's not getting better. Things are getting worse. They realize it, and it's getting harder and harder for them to cover this up with using their statistical numbers, because people are starting to realize and feel that it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're looking at these Gallup polls, and no one's believing this anymore because they're feeling it in their own companies. I mean, I've been talking to people who are working, who are in sales, and they're telling me that strange things are occurring. Sales aren't what they used to be. They're selling less. The company's saying we're not earning as much, so we have to lower your commission. And they're saying, what is going on here? Is there something wrong with the economy? And yes, there is something wrong with the economy. But again, everyone doesn't see it right off the bat unless you're looking very, very closely. Because when you look at the surface number, the statistical numbers that the government is giving you, most people are convinced by that. And most people are looking at the stock market. And that is the last indicator that this entire thing is falling apart. They don't realize that it's been falling apart for a very long time. If we go back to 2008, we know, and when we look back in time, it's much easier to see, we see how it was falling apart all the way up to 2008 when the entire thing came down, when the stock market crashed. But when you're going through it, it's a little bit harder to see unless you're looking very, very closely at it. And we have been looking closely at it, and we're seeing the same signs. We're seeing what is happening, and this is why everyone needs to prepare themselves. just like the Greek people. They saw it coming. A lot of them were not surprised. A lot of them took their money out of the banks. I mean, billions upon billions were removed from the banking system because they knew the banks would shut down. They knew they would be under capital controls. They knew this wasn't going to play out well for them. It was going to be tough to get the supplies they needed. Everyone here needs to do the same thing. If you haven't been doing it, you need to do it. You need to stock up on food. You need to get medical supplies. You need to keep cash on hand. You need to get gold and silver. If you haven't been doing it, you can go right to lifereliance.com. They'll prepare your food, your bug out bags, seeds, you name it, they have everything all together. So if you haven't been preparing, this might be a good time to do it. You can continue going to Costco if you want to go to Costco, BJ's, any of these warehouse clubs. Do that. Buy canned food. Just have something. Just be ready. Because we know when we look at everything, it's getting worse every single day. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially, please be prepared. Thank you.